And we're back to the second segment of the DMZ America podcast. I'm Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right.
I'm Ted Rall, coming to you from the left.
So, vive la France. It's burning to the ground. Protests sweeping the country. President Macron did something. We'll talk. We're obviously going to talk about this. I would actually be in the streets as well, because what he did was utilize a little known French law to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64, which, from our perspective here in America, we're going, you're kidding, right? I think our retirement age is never. But they're at 64, and he unilaterally did it. He tried to get through the legislature. They continually blocked it. This is one of those issues you have to sell the people on. That's what governing is. But President Macron decided to, negate that pesky democracy thing and just unilaterally institute this. And the streets are exploding. They were exploding anyway because they didn't want to. A lot of the people of France did not want to raise the retirement.
2 out of 3.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Ted, you may not know this if you watch or listen to this podcast, you do know this. Ted is a French citizen, dual citizen. So I'm going to defer to him on a lot of this stuff. The French, it just seems to me common sense. The aging of the population, the average life expectancy of the French male now is 79, almost 80. So if you retire,
unlike the U.S., life expectancy in France continues to go up.
Yeah, we're the only Western country that it went down. What, 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row? Well, we could. We're leading the way, man. We dare kill our old people.
We're solving that social security crisis.
One early death at a time. But
dying our way to prosperity.
Explain to me first, and explain to our listeners, Ted, why is there that kind of objection to something that seems so practical?
Well, I think the most interesting piece that I read about this controversy related to how the last time this was done, it was done under a socialist government, and there was no protest whatsoever. I think what's going on here is, look, there's a legitimate case to be made for reforming the pension system to acknowledge both the aging of the population, along with, obviously, people who are 64 today are healthier than people who were 64 20 years ago or 40 years ago. And also the fact that they have demographic problems. France also had a baby boom, and the retirees are largely boomers and silent generation people. So that's a much bigger generation that have to be supported in their retirement by a much smaller population of younger people. Look, Macron has a legitimate concern here, not to say that he couldn't get the money elsewhere by taxing the rich or by taxing corporations, but there's certainly an argument to be made. I think what's going on here is that Macron spent his first 5-year term as a neoliberal tool, basically showing no sympathy whatsoever to the poor, and earned himself a reputation as the president of the rich. So now he doesn't have the moral or political standing to take on anything that reeks of austerity, which this does. So basically, the French people don't trust him that this is not the beginning of the end of the retirement system entirely, or that he won't go after something else next. So I think there's a feeling, it's true that early retirement is part of French culture. And it's really, the French don't like working. They don't like the job. They don't like working in an office. They consider it to be an offense. They just want to spend time, eating snails and drinking wine. And I don't blame them. I feel the same way. And they look forward to turning 62 and living the good life. That's what they want to do. So you tell them, well, it's going to be 2 years longer. That's a problem for them. And because it's a part of their national identity. But there's something else going on too, Scott, which is age discrimination is a huge problem in France, even more than in the United States. So employers in France have a tendency to fire a lot of workers in their 50s. So by the time you're 58, let's say, you're probably unemployed in France. So if you're 58 and you're thinking, okay, I've got to scrape by for 4 years, live off my savings, sleep on my friend's sofa, but I can make it to 62 and I'll be okay. That's one thing. But then you tell them, well, actually it's 64. That's something else. So that's a major issue here that like isn't talked about much. But basically, I think it really, so it's a perfect storm. And as you say, basically, first, it was the president believed that he had the votes in the parliament to through the National Assembly to get this through. But as the protests continued, the centrists in the parliament started to peel away, and he didn't have enough votes anymore, and he knew he wasn't going to. So rather than accept the will of the people, he pulled the trigger on this very infrequently used gimmick that gives the executive branch special powers to pass laws unilaterally without any kind of approval from the parliament. But usually it's not done for sweeping programs like this. So he just doesn't. This is just going to get worse. This morning I woke up to read that the town hall in the city of Bordeaux, which is a major city, was on fire. The visit of King Charles III to France, which was to be his first state visit since assuming the crown, had to be canceled due to the unrest. My personal favorite is that the workers at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris just up and dipped yesterday while planes were still up in the air, and leaving, causing some awkward moments.
Some awkward silences, truly awkward silences. Tower?
Air traffic control, are you there?
Okay, well, let me jump in here too and say the protests have become violent.
Thank you for calling air traffic control.
I think it was what I read this morning. 123 police officers have been injured during the protests. There have been numerous of the protesters who've been hurt and injured. But many of the protesters are young. Now, this surprises someone like me. It surprises probably an American, because France, like everywhere else in the world, is facing this massive retirement of the baby boomers, and they're going to have to be supported by young people. And why would the young people protest in favor of keeping the pension plan where it is, where it's really going to be a burden on them? Is this one of those instances where they're kind of protesting the wrong thing? It feels like it smells like it.
I don't think so. I feel like I think what's going on is, look, they have a different political culture in France. I mean, first of all, it's the difference between a country that's 200 years old and a country that's 2,000 years old. When you're in a country that's 2,000 years old, you think, well, I'm 27 now, but I'll be 67 sooner rather than later, and I want that shit to be there for me at that point. They're not short-sighted like we are. And also politically, they have the sense of solidarity in French political culture cannot be overstated. Right now, the teachers are on strike, the sanitation workers are on strike, the railroad workers are on strike, the truck drivers are on strike, everyone's on strike, right? And that's all in solidarity with pensioners. And most of the people who are on strike are not that old. So, and here in the US, you just don't see that. Like, it would imagine like when Reagan fired the air traffic controllers, PATCO, in 1981, if, let's say, everyone else had gone on strike, all the teachers and so on, it would have been a different outcome. French labor unions and the left have always understood that it was like that there was great power in solidarity. And so they are all there for each other, no matter what. And you could say it's to a fault, but I think it's not. I mean, what it does is it gives the French far more power in their struggles against management than laborers in the US do against management.
So where does this go? Where does this end? And I mean, is there any threat of this happening here in the United States? I keep talking about raising, you and I are both now getting notices that, if you wait till 66 and 10 months, that's for me. You'll get full Social Security. It's like, wait a minute, I was 65.
It's like, yes, in fact, like we said, once you're 68, as we said, once you're 70, yes. As we said, always have said all along.
Once you're dead, as we said, you'll get these glorious benefits.
Once, 2 years after you're dead.
Where does this end for France? Does Macron have to walk it back?
Well, that's what happened. I guess a few years ago, the Yellow Vests caused the gas tax to have to be repealed.
Yeah.
That Macron had. So that's the most likely outcome, is that they will have to change their mind and just go back to age 62. But regardless of that, I mean, from an American perspective, you would imagine that that would probably leave Macron weak. But I'll tell you, if Macron can have his age 64 retirement age, or he can have his presidency, but he can't have both. If he walks it back, French culture will be that, like, okay, we're okay with him because he's responsive to our needs. That's what representative democracy is. We're okay with it, and then he could eventually. He still has a huge majority. His party has a huge majority in the parliament. He'd still be able to govern. He has 4 years left in his term. If he chooses not to do that, he becomes the lamest of all lame ducks. His political will have vanished completely. He will never be able to get anything done again. And so he might as well just resign. He might not, but it would be this is uncharted territory, because we haven't seen anything like this in France before, where, I mean, even if I think about the imperiousness of Charles de Gaulle, who, like, he did in the late 50s, literally pull a coup d'etat to seize power. You can look it up. Even that was, and even his imperiousness that, like, led to Matt's outrage during May 68, when he returned to power. Even him, he had political legitimacy. Macron will not have political legitimacy as long as this law stays in force.
Okay. Well, we covered that. We've got one more segment to go, Ted. I mean, I know you can't wait. I can't wait. We're closely monitoring the non-arrest of a non-president. So that might be hint enough for you. You're listening to the DMZ America podcast. I'm Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right.
Ted Rall, coming to you from the left.
We'll be right back. Stick around.